Okay, welcome everybody to Defy's Ask Me Anything. This is welcome to the Defy community. This is going to be the third installment of our fall 2022 speaker series. My name is Quan Huynh. I am the executive director for Defy out here in Southern California. And I have done 22 years of my life incarcerated. I'm going to have each of the roundtable panelists introduce themselves in a little bit, and we're also going to share how much time each of them did. Some of you may know me, and you may have questions you haven't got to ask before Defy events, but I'm going to pass it to my roundtable partner right now, Terrell.
Thanks, Quan. Terrell Hall. I'm in the Bronx, New York. 16 and a half years of incarceration. And one of the things we wanted to do was make this a genuine AMA. So we wanted to get the word out that for people to really ask those questions, they may not feel comfortable asking and say here at Defy at a business coaching event or business pitch competition or any of that, right? Just to get more up close and personal. And also to help people get a better understanding of where the issues lie and ways that we can actually address this in just the everyday, living our lives. And we do have 140 plus years of incarceration, and we posted that not because we're proud that we served 140 years, definitely proud to have survived it, right? But we're not ashamed of it. We've shed that guilt and shame, which was a huge part of actually changing and growing. And most importantly, we wanted to put the humanity to the front of the work that we do, because sometimes even when we look at statistics or even when we start to label people, say with us, you can call a person an EIT, but so many times before you only see them as an EIT and not a human being. So a part of this AMA is to bring all of that back to the forefront and share some of what we've learned during the course of our incarceration. That's helped us to evolve as human beings and leaders of change. So back to you, Quan.
Okay, thank you, Terrell. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. So fellow panelists, you're going to say your name, your title, where you're located, and years of incarceration. I'm asking for 30 seconds each person, okay? We're going to begin first with Chris Harrison.
I knew it. I'm Christopher Harrison. I'm here in the chapter Defy in Illinois. My role here is program manager of Entrepreneurship Pathways, and my total incarceration time is 18 and a half years in the Department of Corrections.
Thank you, Chris. Next one is Sabrina Reid.
Okay, my name is Sabrina Reid. I am located in the Bay Area. I am the manager of the Northern California chapter of the Career and Reentry Development Programs. I have spent a total of 17 years in prisons, both state and federal, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Sabrina. Okay, Cosme.
Hello, everybody. My name is Cosme Sandoval, and I'm the Career Readiness Program Manager at Defy in Southern California. And I spent over 25 years, one term in California Department of Corrections.
Thank you, Cosme. And David.
My name is David Shirley. I'm the Career and Reentry Manager for Defy Washington. I served over 25 years in Washington State Department of Corrections, and got my sentence commuted back in 2016 and was released in 18.
Okay, thank you, David. There may be some great math whizzes on here, and that this doesn't add up to 140 because we're missing two of our teammates. Some things came up. They unfortunately couldn't make it, but we're going to try to represent them here too. Okay, so we all have so much to share, but as Terrell said, we are limited on time. It's kind of a running joke within our organization that those of us that have been incarcerated tend to have a lot to share and like to talk, but we receive quite a bit of questions, and we're going to try to get through as many as possible, which gives us about 3 minutes for each question. I will have to cut people off, even sometimes when I don't want to, for the sake of time. So Fellow panelists, can you all agree like, hey, we're up at 3? I mean, I have the timer and I'll just say time and I'll just have to cut you off. Okay, but it's okay because we're used to poking jokes at each other anyway. Okay, so, well, today's going to be more like a roundtable discussion since both me and Terrell will also be participating in answering some of the questions that were submitted. And I guess maybe we'll start, right? Y'all ready? Okay. So, question here. And I'll read the question first, and then it will be the first person to answer. I'll throw it to Cosme, and right after that will be 3 minutes for Cosme, and then 3 minutes for Chris. Okay. So here's the question. It says here, I meet a lot of men coming into the institutional life of citizenry, paying bills, cooperating with authorities by getting insurance on a vehicle. It seems that everyone survived the prison experience by gaining a philosophy. This philosophy is totally useless in the world outside. How do I best steer these men away from the prison mentality toward a new view that works? Do others working with the justice involved share my experiences and frustrations? There must be a global best practice. So, Cosme, 3 minutes and now.
Yeah, so I've kind of debated with this question a little bit as far as the philosophy. I believe that many of us that have really put in the work and really embraced change bring out many philosophies that are good philosophies. So to say that it's useless, I wouldn't agree with that. I feel that when I went into prison and for a large period of my incarceration, yes, a lot of my philosophies would be useless out here today, unless I was committed to that negative lifestyle and criminal lifestyle. However, when I embraced change and I began to shift my mindset, those philosophies, such as my loyalty towards something positive, such as it was mentioned in the question, paying bills, being responsible, getting insurance, driving a vehicle with license, being a responsible parent, a mentor towards others. I did a lot of these things within prison and continued that out here. So those philosophies that I brought out, I feel that they're very useful out here, very, as we say, transferable. And so I would never say that it's a one size fits all. I have met people that have gotten out and maintained the old philosophies, and they're just not ready for change. They haven't embraced change yet. So they continue to live that lifestyle. And unfortunately, that's why we see such a high recidivism rate. But for those that have really committed to change, for those that have really embraced a shift in mindset, for those that really get it today, I believe that those philosophies that they've embraced while inside continue and develop even better once they get out. And that's why everyone you see here are productive members of society. I do share in some frustrations when you're trying to help folks out and they just haven't got there yet. But at the same time, I plant seeds. I plant seeds of change, and I plant seeds of what helped me. And I hope that when they're ready, they will embrace those, because I know there was a time when I wasn't ready. But many people planted seeds, and eventually they sprouted into the man that I'm still developing and becoming today. Thank you.
All right, look at that. Still have time on it. Okay, Chris, I threw the question in the chat, but 3 minutes for you, beginning now.
Thank you, Quan. So, yeah, this is a very, it's a question that, I've come across before. The one thing that I would lend to this answer is, how do I best steer these men away from the prison mentality? I don't know if that's good or bad. One, do we even understand what the prison mentality is, right? Only if that person can tell you what that prison mentality is. It could be something good and beneficial, right? Traits and philosophies that can be transferable skills. And then it could be some that could be detrimental, right? Or harmful or at-risk behavior. The best way to view that, as far as I'm concerned, is there's no global practice, right? The only global practices that I know when they're implemented the best way and you can see the product, form, is that you have to meet people where they're at, right? You hit it all the time and it's become lip service, but it's the truth. You have to meet people where they're at, and then you have to do no harm, right? So that's two parts. And it's not about what you can do for them, but what do they need you to do, right? Because you may want to overextend your skill sets and your aspirations for that person to be great, but that's what you want for them. What do they want for themselves? And how can you service them in that way? And when you meet them where they're at and you do no harm, then you'll take some of the pressure off yourself, put the ball and responsibility in their court, and then they're going to make the best decisions for their life, right? Whether it pans out for the better of the good for them, or if they face some other challenges and barriers. So that would be my best way to view it, right? Do no harm, meet people where they're at, and don't lean towards certain negative connotations about prison mentality.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, I'm gonna pass to Terrell to ask the next question.
All right, thanks, Quan. So next up is, for this question, is Sabrina and then Chris. What was a habit that you had while incarcerated that has most impacted your life today? A habit that you had while incarcerated that most impacted your life today. Sabrina?
I love this question because before I had started my incarceration era, I didn't really have any good habits. I have really bad habits. I had habits, I hadn't had a job, never had a job, never had a bunch of responsibility, all this stuff that was bad habits. But in prison, even though it could be considered institutionalization, getting up and going to work at the same time every day becomes a habit. And it's a habit I wouldn't have had if I hadn't gone to prison. And it's a habit that to this day, I'm grateful for. And I'm 53 years old. So it's been a long time, and I've used it for a long time. Like every habit I have that's I really should have learned as a child, probably, I don't know, but I learned in prison. There's a lot of negative stuff that you can learn there, but at the same time, for me personally, my experience was that I learned how to be responsible. And I'm grateful for that. And I love that question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sabrina. Chris?
Right, Terrell. One of the habits that I've come to have while incarcerated that I still have today is learning. That's something when I was before I was incarcerated, school was fine. I didn't have a lot of options, not because I just come from a broken home or some of the other stereotypes, right? Or the neighborhood of schooling. It's just that for me to learn, it wasn't the best environment for me at the time. And I couldn't find the support that I needed when I needed it. So learning was like not a habit, right? It was like I could go to school, I could not go to school. I can learn, maybe I can't learn, who cares, right? But once I got incarcerated and, I started learning and getting education and then got more education, then I started seeing the window to the world. And the world started looking different to me. The way I interacted with people started to look different for me. The way I would allow people to view me and the way I viewed others were different. So I became that learning habit of learning. Like I'm always learning because those are transferable skills. And then like I tell some EITs today, you can't unlearn something you've learned. Once you learn it, you forever have it. It's up to you when you decide to use it, right? So that's one of the best habits that I could have ever gained while incarcerated was learning.
Okay, thanks. You guys are awesome. Quan, you want to ask me the next question?
Sure. Okay, this question is for Terrell, and I'm gonna throw it in the chat so that our volunteers can also see this. But this question is for Terrell. My son is coming home next spring after spending 8 years in prison. What is the most important thing I can do to prepare for his reentry? Are there resources to help families prepare for their loved one's homecoming? 3 minutes now.
Okay, thank you, Quan. So wow, this is a deep one right here, right? So what is the most important thing I could do to prepare for his reentry? I think the most important thing you could do is just understand that you'll never understand what it is to do 8 years in prison, to have your life put on pause for 8 years. That changes the person. So I think the best thing that you could do is to be open-minded and non-judgmental, no matter what trauma your son might bring with him, or no matter what changes or that he's made that you don't agree with, or what quirks he might have. And that's going back to, there is one global practice, right? When we're dealing with justice involved people, and that's meeting people where they are. If I had to point out a best practice, and that's what you're going to have to learn and do with your son, instead of projecting, kind of listening to what's happening and how that change has impacted his person, right? And work with him from there. Yes, there are plenty of resources out here to help families prepare for loved ones, but now how that looks is different from state to state, right? Not in heavily populated areas. You'll have like metro areas. You have a bunch of resources when it comes to reentry, and to find resources that specifically help families takes a little bit more digging, because the concept of criminal justice reform and reentry altogether is still a new concept here, and we don't have all the like tools needed. So but one suggestion I would make if you're listening is going on to fairshake.net. You can actually put in your address or your location, your zip code, and search by mileage of resources available. And I remember uploading a bunch of that stuff for myself, assistance for families and incarcerated people. So that's it. That's all I got on that one, Quan.
Okay, thank you. I think you're asking the next question, Joe.
Yes. This one is for Cosme and Terrell. As a part of creating a second chance for individuals exiting incarceration, it is imperative that we break through societal boundaries. We must stop labeling people as felons or convicts, remove the negative nomenclature, and replace it with something more positive, like justice impacted. What is Defy seeing in the marketplace and or doing to help facilitate this change? Cosme, shoot, my man.
Thank you, sir. So what's Defy doing? Well, one, in many programs, we hear the word participant, we hear all these different labels, right? And some are fine. For us, it's entrepreneurs in training. So one of the things that I love when we go into different programs, it's very clear. We don't address anybody, or we don't deal with convicts, felons, any of these names that society has labeled us with. We deal with entrepreneurs in training, EITs. That in itself gives our folks empowerment. They are proud when they stand up and say, I am an EIT. I am a graduate of Defy. So what I'm finding now out here in society is that, and I know in New York, they had a big campaign on this, and it's to remove these labels, these demeaning labels, the labels that have been put on folks to keep you down. That's how I view it. It's my personal opinion. For me, I'm not an inmate. I'm not ex-con. I'm not any of those things. For me, I'm Cosme. That's who I am. That's my name. And so when I'm given a title, per se, it can be meant in so many different ways. And I believe now our goal, not only in Defy, but as ourselves in the work that we do, is to empower folks, empower each other, and not necessarily label anybody with anything. But if you have a title, that it's something that brings you up, not brings you down. And so I love that we refer to our folks as EITs, and it's an equal playing field for all of us. Nobody's any better. And so I'm grateful that is at the forefront, because words, they have power. They hold immense power, and our goal is to uplift, not to bring down.
Thank you, Cosme. So for me, all the things that you said that we're doing, we even again calling participants EITs and working with them as human beings first, and then business people. All of those things are reminders that, to help them reestablish agency and autonomy, right? To rehumanize them in that sense. And what we're doing is what we've learned and understand is that, the average person, even the volunteers who come and, want to make a difference and want to make an impact, they still don't understand the nuances of like this whole thing, right? So people are going to call you felons and convicts or, inmates and all these different things because that's what we've been putting out there. So we've been really intentional in trying to offset that. And, even with fair chance hiring workshops, we lead with the language, right? And what it means. And when we have our volunteer meetings or volunteer orientations is one of the first things we try to highlight because it is really important. And I remember myself being in prison, it was the way that means of for CO to actually demean you, right? Is to call you inmate and not call you by your name. And people don't know that. So what we're doing, and we understand that not everybody is going to know that. And what we try to do is just give people alternatives and help them to understand why that has to change. And it goes right back to that fundamental acceptance and creating redemptive spaces out here on the outside. And it starts with that very same power of words that I think it was Cosme that you opened with. So that's all I got for you on this one, Quan. It's on you, brother.
Okay. And I just realized I've only been posting the questions for the panelists here, not everyone else. So you may see some new stuff coming out, everyone. So my apologies on that. Question, this one's going to be for Chris. How does a person maintain a positive mindset and the motivation to work towards self-improvement through self-study or participation in a course such as Defy? Conversely, how does a person when depressed find help to regain a positive mindset? Is there any particular philosophy that supports a positive mindset under the pressures of incarceration?
That sounds like a three-part loaded question. I just want to put that out there. So I'll try to see the course. So to maintain a positive mindset, first line of defense is, what does your family and your friends dynamic look like, which is something many of us on the call may not know at first glance, right? Because the better support system you have, the better it is for you to get more support, right? And then so far as Defy is concerned, yes, we advocate for a positive mindset, right? We celebrate it, we promote it, right? We also teach it, right? We teach mind shift, mind sharing. We also do a lot of self-work, right? We don't just talk about entrepreneurship and tell you how you can build your business and conquer the world as the next Jeff Bezos, right? No, we also talk about the things that happen well before you decide to conquer the world as an entrepreneur. And that's the mindset of the human being, right? Where are you at as a citizen, as a father, a mother, a brother, a sister? And what is your interaction in the community, right? How do you view the community? That's one of the things that we do starting in boot camp, where we do move in the community with our EITs, right? Where we take them in the community and we do community partnerships, right? So that's just one layer. And also, so far as like any levels of depression or mental illness, things people suffer from, right? Not just EITs, maybe staff, right? We do have people in our wheelhouse and partnerships with people that can service, right? If they give us those signs like, hey, I'm struggling with trauma, I'm struggling with depression or anxiety of those levels. Have the skill sets to, assist them. So positive mindset is something that, if you want it, you can have it with or without Defy. But with Defy, we definitely promote it, right? You're going to have it to maintain as a citizen first, as a human being. And then as the CEO of your own company, right? CEO of your new life, you got to have a positive mindset, right? So, that's what I think I can give so far as a positive mindset.
Thanks, Chris. This next question, first of all, I like to preface this with be careful what you ask for. But this question is for David, Cosme, and Chris. The question is, I'd like to learn about the prison economy. What types of businesses do people run inside? Dave, it's on you, big guy.
All right. So kind of works like out here. It's the same thing. Like you got guys that run stores, a store which they'll buy Snickers and chips and soup, stop ramen, stuff like that. Hygiene items as well, like toothpaste, stuff like that. But they'll do like a BOGO, buy one, get one free, like on a soup or something, just like they do at Safeway, buy one, get one free. And I like to tell a lot of our EITs when they first come on board, they ask, I don't know nothing about business or marketing and stuff like that. And I bring that up to them. I say, hey, do you remember, did you ever run a store when you were did you ever do this? And that's some of the questions I'll ask them. And they'll be like, yeah. I said, what do you know? You just don't know certain terminologies and what it's called out here and stuff like that. But it's all the same thing, right? Then after a while, they start connecting the dots. They're like, man, I do know this stuff. And it's kind of cool to see when that comes through. It stores are a main thing. Gambling is another source of economy. Guys sit there and they'll gamble their paycheck and double it or triple it or lose it. There's different things they do. They might do laundry, iron somebody's clothes for visiting, for family visits, stuff like that. Paint portraits or cards for Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays, stuff like that. And they trade also. It's not cash, right? Because you ain't got cash in there. Your cash is your store. Your store being the Snickers that you might have bought or off the store or from your local grocery store 2 stalls down. So all kinds of ways to make the economy is kind of it flourishes in there, believe that.
All right, thanks, Dave. Cosme.
Yeah, I mean, Dave covered a lot of it. There's so many. I mean, there's hustle, right? And not everybody has a lot of money coming in. Some folks may be what I would consider prison rich, and some folks are broke and they hustle by cutting hair. Some do anything from. I'll share what I did, and so I monopolized the market at the last institution I was in, and there was no iron. There was no way to iron. People would try to iron with the comb and do the soap dish thing and stuff like that. But I ended up coming across a real iron. And because I was a programmer, the staff left me alone. And so I basically asked permission and I asked the building officer if I could have this iron and iron for the folks. And he said, as long as you iron for everybody, I got no problem. Get your hustle on. And you know what? I made a lot of money ironing and I used to love to iron. Now I don't really like ironing, but back then I loved it. Another thing I would do, I didn't like my family sending me money. I would prefer for them to do other things. So when I got a package, I would get like a box. They had this company, we could get like a big box of grandma cookies and you would get like 30-something cookies for like $15. So I would sell them for $1 on the weekends and people would buy them. And so I would double the money because it was 32 in there. I made $32. It cost my people 15. I'd use that money to get extra stuff that I needed from commissary. So yeah, there's absolutely many ways to hustle. People do it. Legal hustle, illegal hustle still out there. When I first was hustling, when I first went to prison, I still had the same negative mindset that we talked about, that philosophy. So I sold drugs because that's what I knew how to do. And so that was part of the hustle until I realized, you know what? I've changed. That illegal stuff is no longer an option, but I continue the hustle, and I continue the hustle out here today. So hustle is just ingrained.
Yeah. Thank you, Cosme. Chris, can we hear from you, brother?
Of course you can. So this is one of my favorite topics because, you know, inside of most prisons, any prison, there's a whole economy busting, right? There's a whole multicultural subpopulations, everything, right? One thing people forget about is that there are entrepreneurs in prison, right? That never had any formal training, never been to school, right? And I was one of them too, right? Because I'm like Cosme, I didn't bother my family with money, right? I didn't write home and say, send me a bunch of money so I can go get the things that I need. I felt like I got myself in this jam. I'm going to take care of myself, right? I'm not going to be a burden to anyone else. So one of the things that I was doing was cooking, right? I was like the gallery chef. Is to do things that were not being done. I found ways to make omelets, right? They was like, oh, an omelet, how do you do that, right? Found ways to make pizzas that looked like it came out of a restaurant. And I would sell those on game days, right? I would sell pastelitos, pizza puffs, 3 different versions, beef, pork, turkey, right? For those who choose different eatings. I cut hair because I also was a barber before I came in. But it all depends too, mostly where you're stationed at, right? What that economy looks like. I've seen guys business as a tutor, right? For guys who's going to school and serious about school, they need tutoring. I hired a guy. I was bad at math, right? And I paid him to tutor me. I've seen guys, trainers, personal trainers, guys in jail want to be healthy and they want to look good on a visit when they wear them tight clothes and they hug their wife or their woman, right? And then also I did sewing, right? I was gifted in sewing. I learned that trade, and most of the jail uniforms don't fit, right? So I would get paid to tailor your jail outfit so you could look nice going on your visit. And I love this topic because, you know, with Defy, like that's what we do. We do entrepreneurship. In each chapter, in each state that we're in, we go inside the prisons and start that journey there. There are already entrepreneurs there, right? They just need the support and assistance. So yeah, there's a whole economy, hustle, grind, and entrepreneurship in the prisons.
Thank you, Quan. Back to
Okay,
you.
thank you, Terrell. Okay, so this next question is going to be for Cosme. In being around some folks who have come home from prison, there is often talk around making up for lost time. Given your experience, do you feel that this is a healthy thinking habit, given that time is always progressing and the past is always behind us? Why or why not?
So in my opinion, I believe that you cannot make up for lost time. That's my opinion. As the question states, you know, time is always progressing. If I focus on trying to catch up on over 25 years of incarceration, I'm not going to make it. So I like to live in the now and prepare for the future, right? And so when I was incarcerated, I always felt like I had to do catching up. I had to do all these figuring things out. And it came to a point where once I was at peace with basically living free on the inside, I lived in the moment. I cherished the moment. I enjoyed the moment. I experienced the moment. Many times people out here say, you know, don't forget to, you know, take time to smell the roses. I was smelling the roses in prison. And so coming out here, if I focus so much on making up for lost time, I think I would miss out on smelling the roses. And so I live day by day, focused on the now, but preparing for the future. And so once I started to do that, even on the inside, my time just flew by. I was at peace, and my whole change just, you know, I truly developed and blossomed. And so I think that it can be very unhealthy to get stuck in that mindset of I need to make up for this lost time. And honestly, if we really stop and think about it, you can't. You can't go backwards. We're getting older. Things have, passed us on. You can learn. Like technology passed us up, kind of. It just developed. And I've been out going on 5 years. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I'm not trying to catch up. I learn as I go and go with the flow.
Thank you, Cosme. And I'm going to pass it to Terrell to ask the next question. I think you're still on mute, Terrell.
My bad. The next question is for David. Given that we just had Thanksgiving and we're coming up on the winter holidays, what are holidays like for you in prison?
Well, for me, I used to get together with a lot of my friends in there, and we'd make a spread. The chow hall, they'd have say for instance, like Thanksgiving, they'd have turkey and some mashed potatoes and stuff like that, but it's nothing compared to, the being at home at the big table and whatnot, or sharing a meal with your family. It's real small, probably cold. It's nothing really pleasing, but you usually make a spread with your friends. Can make it anywhere from burritos to nacho spreads. I know it's not your traditional Thanksgiving meal, but or any holiday meal, but like say with birthdays, right? We celebrate those with cakes, or you take honey buns and smash them down and make them into one big cake, and then add different frostings and whatnot. But that's how I do it, was with friends in there. But it's a way to you're not out there with your loved ones. You don't get to spend this holiday with them, so it's a way to carry on the traditions that you've learned as a growing up, and kind of build that within your community that you're in, because that's what you're in. You're in a community of fellow people that you're locked up with, and so you make the best of it as you can. And I don't know, for lack of better words, I would have to say that it's kind of like a way to, forget or those sad memories, or those sad, what your family's doing right now, right? So you want to kind of, block that out and keep pushing, keep doing your time, and do it the best you can, like making spreads and hanging out and stuff like that.
All right, thanks, David. Quan is back on you, my brother.
Okay. This one is going to be for Cosme. Sometimes I feel conflicted about volunteering in prison because it can feel like prison tourism or great white saviorism, or just very out of touch or condescending. Did you ever have that feeling about volunteers in prison? What were the best experiences of outside volunteers engaging in prison?
Man, so the only time that I had a negative impact, it was not by volunteers. It was by maybe politicians or folks touring a prison. And I remember a particular time where we were on program, and they ended up recalling the program and putting us in our cells because these folks were going to tour. In that instance, absolutely, I felt like a cage animal, like it was a zoo or circus event, and we were just being showcased. But as far as volunteers coming in, giving of their time, sharing their experiences, helping me, man, those instances marked me in the most impactful and most positive way. Here I was, not knowing if I ever was going to come home, and working on my change. And I had folks coming in and telling me, hey, man, we care about you. Hey, you speak well. when I didn't believe in myself and didn't think I could speak well. Here's folks coming in and helping me to educate myself. And these are people that don't know me. My loved ones would visit me, but they're my loved ones. You know, someone sometimes expects your loved ones to come see you. But when the volunteers were coming in and giving of their time, those are like the memories that just I hold so dear and were life-changing. I ran into someone just recently that was part of a Kairos event. Kairos is an organization that goes into prisons, and they share their time for several days. And I connected with him, and I shared what I went through in Kairos when I participated. And man, just the hug that I got from him is like I was family, and we had never met. And so that's the impact that I got from volunteers. That's the impact that I see today from volunteers going in with Defy. And I would just say, do not hesitate to volunteer. I would say it is impactful not only for yourself, but even more so for those men and women that are in these programs. So volunteer away.
Thank you, Cosme. And I'll add briefly for volunteers for us. And I see one of our volunteers here suggested it, and I was going to bring this up, is when volunteers come in, when I was incarcerated, and those of you out here that have been to hot yoga, it's just imagine you're in hot yoga, it's very hot stuff, you're tired, and then at the end they open the doors and that fresh air just comes in and everything just feels, that's how it feels for us while we're incarcerated when volunteers come in with your colors, your smiles, your love, and it just makes us feel connected, and it makes us feel refreshed because there's all these different colors. So when you come into prison, I think you impact our incarcerated brothers and sisters a lot more than you're giving yourself credit. So thank you for continuing to come in, those of you that have. I think this next question is going to be for Terrell.
Well, it's going to be for me to ask you.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's what you mean. So this is your opinion, right, Quan? What percentage, roughly, of a prison population is actively seeking a way to live a clean life when they are released?
So I remember when I read this question, I thought for me, the way it's worded, it didn't make sense to me, because I think it's more for myself. I looked at it as what percentage of our prison population is given an opportunity to live a clean life when they are released, or given an opportunity to have programs while they're there, because I think this question is assuming that everybody or a large majority of our incarcerated brothers and sisters are just using drugs or whatever, or haven't addressed their substance abuse issues. But I think if there's opportunities for them to address them, if there's opportunities for them to make a living out here, then I would have to say a large majority of our incarcerated brothers and sisters are just looking for a second chance or an opportunity to give that. That would be my answer to that.
Thank you, Quan. I'm gonna leave it up to you to ask the next one.
Okay. Oh, this one is going to be for Sabrina, who we have not heard from in a minute. Okay, so based on your experiences and talking with other inmates, does the possibility of going to prison for an extended period prevent people from committing crimes?
Ooh, okay, that's a good question. I think that it really depends on, can you hear me? Okay. It's not a question that it'd be just one question for everybody, because you have to consider where a person's from, where they're going home to, what race, there's so many things that are complex and have something to do with that question. What I do know is what kind of things that are offered in the prison before release, programs, reentry plans, things that they can look forward to getting out and actually having be there and have a chance of being successful. I can say no, every person that gets out and has a chance to do something that makes them feel good, that's where it comes the not wanting to go back. The fear of time is not going to hold somebody back if they're desperate, if they're like there's so many things that can shape that. It's kind of like you don't have nothing to lose. If you feel like that, you have nothing to lose, and no, that's not going to make a difference. But what making a person feel good, what we put into the reentry system, what jobs are available. I like to say that the first couple months of a person coming out is like a baby. The first what happens in that 2 months can affect their entire lives. And people really flourish when they have the opportunity to feel good about themselves and what they're doing. People want to come out and be part of their community, whatever that means for that person. And so really recidivism has a lot to do with what preparation and what can happen in prison. You have a lot of time to think and to read and to explore. You can really prepare yourself when you're inside for what's going to happen outside. That's all.
Thank you, Sabrina. I'll pass it to Terrell.
All righty. All right. This question is for Sabrina. You're first, Cosme, Quan, and David. Do you make lifelong friendships? Do you
Yes.
make lifelong friendships? Yeah, like I'm assuming maybe that they were saying in prison. But just answer both for clarity. Do you make lifelong friendships?
It's funny because you don't really think of it. It took me a long time to realize that, yes, I always thought that what happened in prison was not as good as what happens out in the real world, that that we are different than people who are going to college and going and working in tech. But connection and friendships happen on a very, very deep level in prison, and all kinds of stuff happens, drama and family. You get to know a person better than anybody has ever known them, at least personally. It's my experience. And then there's everlasting connections, except that sometimes you get out and they're still there. So there's also a deep level of guilt. And there have been times where I didn't want to leave because I didn't want to leave people behind. I was happy. I had friends. I was working. I was doing all these incredible things that I didn't think I could do when I got released. And that's been my experience.
Thank you. Cosme?
Yeah, my family often looks at me kind of crazy when I tell them that I miss prison, right? And I tell them I miss prison, but I don't miss prison. And then I go on to explain. And what I miss is those lifelong friendships that I made. Sabrina just stated how difficult it was and guilt-ridden, being found suitable for parole and knowing that I was going to leave behind my brothers. And so I'm in constant contact with several of my brothers that are still inside, and many of the ones that have gotten out, those are my friends today, my brothers still. I celebrated a birthday in September, and my wife kind of was a surprise. I thought it was only going to be family coming over, just a few family members. And all of a sudden, one of my brothers walks into my backyard. He lives in San Francisco. He flew just for the occasion, just for a few hours to spend it with me for my birthday. This is a brother that I met inside at our worst, saw each other grow up, helped each other grow up, and saw each other. He paroled before me, and then he was there for me when I got out. And to this day, we are brothers, and so those lifelong friendships definitely exist. And as far as for folks out here, from my old circle and my past friends, it's very, very few that remained and that went on to have productive lives and be good, productive citizens. And I have a few that still are around, but still I'm so much closer to my brothers from, as my wife refers to, brothers from the joint. you know, the BOJs. And so I'm grateful for those friendships. Those are my accountability partners. Those are my support network, my everything.
Okay, thank you, Cosme. Quan?
Yeah, do you make lifelong friendships? Yeah, I would have to say some of the most amazing human beings that I've known are still incarcerated. Fortunately, a lot of them are also now home. On Thanksgiving, I was hanging out with one of my buddies. We were both doing life at Donovan back in like 2002. He came over and we were just like, hey, I let him know like my mom cooks Thanksgiving meals every year and she's just always stressed. And I said, hey, I think you and I could get this stuff done like way before. So let's cook all the food, let's wash all the dishes so that mom can just relax. He said, okay, we planned it out just like if you were working in the kitchen, I used to know how, okay, this is how we plan in the kitchen. Let's do this. We set it all up. He's like, I don't think we'll get done by 12:30. We got done by like 11:45, finished everything, washed all the dishes. And now it's just, we just have everything ready to eat. So it was just a shared experience where I don't know, we video game together. There's just this bond that's always there. So yeah, it's many lifelong friendships. Some of them perhaps will never come home, but I'm glad that there's a large majority of them that are now home, but the ones that are not home, I still miss them. There were days when I first came home, I felt like very lonely. I didn't feel connected. I missed a lot of people that were still stuck inside, and I felt out here like no one understands this journey that I've been on, and I couldn't really talk about it. So now that is, like Cosme said, that is my support network. That is like, if there's something going on, if I'm frustrated about things, or if I'm happy about things, I could call him, I could talk to him, I could share. So yep.
Okay, thank you, Quan. David?
Yeah, for sure. So I got guys I was in the county jail with when I was first sentenced, and man, two of them live right down the street from me. It's kind of weird. But I've been out for 5 years now, and we meet up all the time, play pool together, or watch a race, birthdays, celebrate now, their children's birthdays or something like that, and just have barbecues and whatnot, and we share that experience to where, I mean, there's been many times where a lot of people out here didn't know I did prison time, and they're like, what? They're shocked. They're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, but we sit there and we laugh about it. We're sitting there like, I just don't understand. And they're like, because like what Cosme referred to earlier, we're people, right? We're nobody different than anybody else, and we build friendships like like everybody, and just like your old high school friends and stuff like that. It's no different, right? However, there's different levels, right? Because in prison, I like to refer to it as different masks that we all wear. To like, you got your tough guy mask when you need to, right? Because prison, is sometimes can be a really dangerous place. But then you have your masks on for like the officer when he's trying to find something in your cell. He's like, that ain't mine, I don't know where that came from, or something like that. But we learn all these things, so they're different levels, but it's no different, I believe, than out on the out here in the world.
Thank you. Quan, pass it back to you to ask me a question, I guess, or to ask a question.
Yep. Okay. Okay, here we go. Yeah. What's one thing that supported you the most in the process of transforming your life? So let me throw that in the chat. Terrell, did you want to answer?
Yeah, so initially I was thinking that I won't even tell you what I was initially thinking, but the most important thing that what supported me the most in my process of change, of transforming my life, what I would have to say was my mindset, right? And understanding that I was, you know, the consistent piece, right? The common denominator across the board, no matter what was going on, you know, how it came at me, you know, I was the common denominator, and it forged like more agency and autonomy on my part because at the end of the day, you know, I know that I have me when I can't depend on anyone else, and I've been in those situations for years, right? Where I couldn't depend on anyone else when all I had was me. So probably the thing that supported me the most was just understanding that at the end of the day, you know, I have to have my back, and understanding that the things that mostly reared up in my life, that I played a part in creating those things. And just like I built certain things, I would have to destroy certain things. So that mindset just carries over in every aspect of my life. Just understanding I'm that common denominator and I do have a say so. And it's been the most important thing for me.
Thank you, Terrell. Chris.
So I think for me, one of the things that supported me the most in the process of my
It's a little bit
transformation.
hard to hear you, Chris.
Can you hear me now? Okay. What about now? Good. Yeah. So one of the things that helped me in my transformation the most was I had an opportunity to like really unpack me, right? Like I had different time frames and levels where I was able to peel back, you know, who I was before incarceration, right? And that came through me taking classes. That came from me like taking psychology classes and things of those natures. And then I realized like, man, you kind of was like, you went through some stuff that you just wrote off, you know, as just daily living in Chicago, right? But once I realized that, like one time real quick, I didn't understand why I hated Christmas so much. It's like, I hate Christmas. Like I was like the Grinch, right? Until I started peeling back, like, you know, Christmas was never really celebrated in my household, right? And that affected my adulthood. So that along with other things, like once I started peeling back, like who am I, who was I, who am I now, and then who I like to be once I touch back to society as a citizen, right? Like what image do I want to give? What authentic self do I want to give back to society? And that was one of the things, just unpacking me.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, I'm going to pass it to Terrell.
All right, so I'm just gonna ask this question to just open this question up to the entire panel. What's the one thing you would like to change most about the prison system? And it's a bonus for suggestions on how. So what's the one thing, and there's a bonus for the how. It's Cosme, I see you wanted to answer.
Yes, so one thing that I would like to change most about the prison system, I look back right now, and when I see our EITs and how they embrace the program, I wish I would have had the program. I traveled up and down the state in 25 years. I transferred 9 times to 8 different facilities, and never once was I able to get or was aware that Defy even existed. So what I would change is the uniformity of programs and education available throughout, and I'll speak for California because that's where I did my time, the California prison system. So if you go to San Quentin State Prison, they have a number, I mean, numerous programs, and they've had it that way for so long. With college, they have professors coming in to teach, volunteers. They have developed a lot of programs, and sporadically, some programs have spread out. College has slowly spread out throughout the prison system, but still not at the rate that I believe that it should be. If you have one facility that's like a model facility and is known for their programming, Why not take that model and implement it at all the facilities and make it equal for everybody? I believe if we had like, we preach and we talk about our mindset and shifting mindsets, right? And a lot of programs offer so many positive things. If you know they're working, why not implement them statewide so that you have a larger number of people coming out with changed mindsets and being productive individuals? Why not spread college out where people can get not only their A's, but their bachelor's and maybe even more, and come out educated and empowered? So there are many facilities to this day that are being left out. I read letters from folks still writing to Defy and saying, how can we get your program started here? And that goes for education, that goes for self-help programs and so many other things. So that's what I would do, is make it uniform throughout all the facilities in each state to have the programs that have proven to work.
Thank you, Cosme. I was just like to add to that. For me, I think that what I like to change most about the prison system is the whole prison model itself, to just move away from it being a punitive model to more of a healing model, right? Because we're not throwing people in a place to get rid of them, right? The idea is to have them to sit down and reevaluate things and then join us again, right? And I think when we exercise the punitive model, we create more of the less desirable things, the less desirable outcomes, I should say. And if we move more towards a healing model where the community, we're all involved as partners, right? Because as it stands right now, it's us against them, meaning, the formerly incarcerated and CBOs against, parole, probation, and Department of Corrections. And in an ideal system that impacts us all so greatly, right? It would be who of us to like move towards a healing model. So that's the one thing I would change. Anybody else?
Yeah. One of the things that I would change in my experience that I've had here in Illinois was that maybe some training around staff. The CEO staff was the guys that was, in the college setting that was trying to better themselves while there to leave, they was marginalized, right? And they were, poked at, made fun of, right? You think you're better than the rest of these inmates or convicts. And, that's something that should not be poked at, but celebrated, encouraged, and saluted, right? Because for every person that's like, has that mind shift and that mindset to like go to school really and get that degree and get that GED, then that's the person that's pretty much not catching tickets. That's the person that's not confrontational with officers. That's the person that's following the rules, right? Because they want to maintain access to education and not be disenfranchised or targeted. And, a subpopulation is already in prison. And guys that's doing that, they don't need extra poking at by staff, right? And marginalized. And then other, inmates, they look at that and they buy into that rhetoric, right? So that's one thing that I would have, if I could, training on staff to support those inmates that's doing those great things.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Anybody got anything they want to add before I turn it back over to Grandmaster Q? Nope, it's on you, Grandmaster Q.
David, Sabrina's kind of quiet today. I was hoping that they would hop on that question. Here's one that we saw in the chat earlier. Thank you, Terrell. If you were able to improve conditions inside prisons, what would you do to improve them?
More programming. More like when I say programming, not like these programs that they come up with in these silos that have no people with like system impacted that are system impacted, but programs that are mostly led by system impacted people is what I would lead with. because I think that's one of the greatest catalysts we have towards change when it comes to the individual in prison, is that having another someone exhibit that change under those circumstances, right? It makes it a lot easier to step in that. So that's one thing I would definitely change.
How about someone else that hasn't had a chance to share much?
They scared.
I think I know when I and this kind of hurts a lot of us too in a sense. When I got locked up at a young age, right? And when I got released, I mean, they say you come in at a certain age and you leave with the same kind of thoughts, right? Because when you come in, the world stops, right? As you know it, it just completely shut down. And so because of that, when you get out, you, for me, right, and I've talked to a lot of other guys, you don't have the same life experiences as everybody else that's already been living out there. So you miss out on certain things, and it could be anything from relationships to stuff like that. And I think that there should be opportunities for when we go in, or for men and women who go into prison like that, to have some kind of life where they can gain those. Because like when we're in a relationship, you don't know the do's and don'ts of I don't know, what not to say to somebody's guest when they come over to a table, or what, just little things that you don't pick up on that are other people are like, what's this guy doing? That's kind of rude. You know what I mean? And it's like you don't realize it because you're referring back to, you know, the prison, the way you did stuff in prison and whatnot, and it's not the same out in the community. My first couple of relationships when I got out were rocky because I didn't know how to effectively communicate to my partner, because I never had those life experiences, unfortunately. But I think there should be something geared around that as well.
Funny you say that, because that's one of my big, Darlene and I have a workshop that we're doing right now about relationships. And I think that's the most important thing to really cover. Relationships, meaning you're with your family, with your mother, with your father, with your girl, like all that stuff. Those are the triggers that bring people back to prison in so many different ways. I mean, the recidivism rate for a long-term, I don't know what the word is to use these days, but lifers, especially, like this is 2%, 2 to 3% recidivism rate for someone who's done a good amount of time. That's really low. I don't know if you know anything about statistics, but county jail or probation recidivism is at about 67% here in this area. And really, but what happens is the inability to know how to deal with emotions and communication triggers, you know, and all of a sudden all kinds of stuff can happen. And so having it covered, it's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable thing for a woman to be saying, teaching a class to guys. The whole thing is uncomfortable, but it's imperative. Just because we're uncomfortable about some things doesn't mean it doesn't need to be covered. And I think that preparing people for the reality of relationships and communication is very important.
Anybody else? Okay, maybe we'll go, maybe one last question. What is a misperception about prison you've come across, or an example of an interesting question you've been asked about your lived experience? I'll throw it in the chat.
I think when I came home, one of the misperceptions from my point of view was like, everybody was like, where your muscles at? I was like, what? They was like, why you not swole like in the movies, right? Like you're not beefcaked out. And I was like, no, that's a fallacy. Everybody doesn't do that in prison. There's a small portion, that's like a little group, a community, a subpopulation that does that, right? Which is good for them. And and my rebuttal was, I didn't lift weights, man. I lift books. That's what I lift. That was my claim, right? That's how I strengthen myself. So for me, saying that everybody coming out of prison is going to be cut like Terry Crews is a myth.
And I think education, like people, people, I've gotten questions and I've heard things like people think that people who are in prison are not educated. And they might, whether they are or aren't, the education you can receive while you're incarcerated is more than I can say for a lot of people that I know that who are smart. You know, I'm the most intelligent, well-read, interesting people I've ever met in prison. And sometimes they learn it while they're in prison. It doesn't matter how they learn it. They're not lacking any kind of intelligence. And then as far as like coming into job stuff, you know, it used to be about 5-6 years ago, you know, a janitor maybe was like a job you could get, and you know, thinking that job skills don't happen in prison. I've had guys come out with 20 years of welding and then some other stuff. And I'm like, welding union? I mean, like it just never really was even thought about that. That is that's work experience. Very good work experience. And that becomes the habit I was talking about earlier. But those are my two.
For me, one of the misperceptions about prison that I've come across, for one, I know that I've run into folks that assume that everybody that is in prison and remains in prison or even gets out of prison are bad people. And I can tell you now, I met some of the most lovable, caring individuals that I've ever met inside prison. You know, and so prison is not full of bad people. We may have made some bad choices at one time and gone through, and I'll speak for me, gone through some, you know, bad stuff, created lots of harm, and deserved to be in prison. I know I was. I did deserve to be in prison at the time, but deep down, I had morals, I had values instilled in me by family members, my parents, who have been married for 50 years now. So prison is not full of bad people. One thing that Sabrina touched on, and I'll touch on it briefly too, I remember going in, and when I was preparing to come out, the misconception that when you got out, the only job that I was going to be able to do was a labor job, construction job, that was it, you know, and that had me scared because I'm getting older. I went in when I was 19, now I'm 45. Am I going to be able to do construction for the rest of my life? And when I got out, to realize that no, it's wide open. It's whatever you want to do. And like I tell our EIT, short of becoming a cop, because that more than likely is not going to happen, you can be and do whatever you want to do. Educate yourself. I have friends that are former lifers that are in law school right now preparing to be attorneys. I have friends that are in all walks of life, every field you can imagine, because they chose that's what they wanted to do. And that's what I share with our EITs as often as I can, is focus on what you love to do, what you want to do, and let's work on getting that, because that's what you deserve. You don't have to go be a janitor or go in construction or go be a career readiness program manager at Defy. You don't have to do any of those. You do what you want to do.
Right. Can I add on to that real quick, Quan? Is enough time? So for me, the biggest misperception is that prison in and of itself is a deterrent, and it's really not. And I think that people believe that, and I think that's why people still believe in the system as it stands, because especially if you've never been through it, you think, oh shit, prison is, you know, a great big monster or something. That I hear people say all the time, I don't know how you survived. You'll figure it out if you get there. And I think it's a really huge misperception out there that prison is just gonna scare us away from crime. And this brings us back to why the work that we do is so important, because prison itself, even under the conditions now, right, are not enough to deter people from crime because of some of the societal issues that we have, right? The things that have gone, you know, unaddressed for so long. has created this monster. So I think that's the biggest misperception for me, is that like by building more prisons, excuse me, and giving people more time, that it'll act as a deterrent against future crime and all of that. And it's just not true.
Okay, thank you, Terrell. And we didn't get to say bye to David, but he had to run into prison. Speaking of prison, he had to go to begin facilitating some of our classes, delivering our curriculum over there.
Yeah, like that guy anyway, man.
Okay, so that wraps it up. I mean, each of everybody, any last thoughts you want to share briefly before we wrap up? Anything else that you needed to say? If not, that's also okay.
Just one last thing for me, Quan, is I really want to highlight the humanity piece, which is a major part of why we're doing this, right? In that, and I tell people when I first went to prison, you know, certain types of people I stayed away from and all of that, not because I was trying to change my life. I was still like out of my mind, right? But for certain reasons. And the thing is that, you know, and I thought I had like a rough life and all of this stuff, until I started really hearing other people's stories, right? So, you know, I've heard all my life, don't judge a book by its cover. And I'm like, yo, I can read people pretty good, you know, like from the outside, you know, you think you know. And the thing is, I met so many people, and even after hearing, like, you hear like this horrendous crime until you get like the details of it maybe. And it kind of alters your perspective a little bit. And the more I spoke to people and got more people's stories, the more understanding I become and the more I evolved as a human being, because I was keeping myself stagnated with all my judgments and preconceived notions. So I would just like to say that anytime you encounter someone, especially if they're open enough to share that they have a history, is to not judge, but seek to understand.
It's a great reminder, Terrell. Okay. Chris, Cosme, Sabrina, last thoughts before we close this out.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody that had a chance to tune in, right? You could have been doing anything else with your time, but you decided to come hang out with us and listen to us talk about our experience, right? It all ties into the great work that we're trying to do and continue to do with Defy. So we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, ditto on that. And just thank you for your time, and know that human kindness is probably the biggest tool we have. It's free. You got it in you, use it. For those of us who have been incarcerated, like especially being, you know, a white woman from Menlo Park, I will forever owe more than most, only because of the conditions and opportunities that I've had in my life, and not everybody gets those, and that should be the focus going forward. Is everybody should be equal. Everybody should have the same rights as everybody else, and that's it.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody that joined, and I'm very grateful for having had the opportunity to shed some light and knowledge through answering the questions that were asked. So just thank you so much for everybody. And for that volunteer question, man, I hope people just go out there and volunteer, because it's life-changing on both sides of it.
Okay, thank you, Cosme. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so we'd love to invite you to join us in this work in a number of ways, as we are all at Defy because of our passion to help other people with lived experience. Quickly, just to tell you where we're at, what we're up to. These are just some stats of where our presence is nationally, as you can see from the map. See that how you can get involved with us. Let me see, can we go to the next one? Oh, there it goes. Okay. And here you can take action with us. You can join us as a volunteer. Many of you on this call have already come in as a volunteer, either in prison, virtually with us on our virtual events, or in prison, or in our community events. We have a Wire-a-thon coming up. Our goal is to try to reach $50,000. Whoops. Can we go back one? Thank you. 50 to serve more people in 2023. And if you're an employer, if you want to help us make an impact in that capacity, please email partnership@Defy Ventures. You could host a workshop. We have mock interviews, and you could actually meet and interview and hire or defy EITs. And one more. Thanks for joining us. We do have some events coming up in Illinois, in the tri-state, and in on the west coast of California. So there'll be a link in the chat to help join us and help partner and help us make a difference in the world. So thank you, everybody.